Good morning. It's Coach Kerr with the LFS-Kali Fight Team and doing another episode of two FMA-Nerds talk about stuff. So I'm going to bring on Rene Growling Dog Cocolo. He is a DBMA guy. He's on a lot of podcasts and he's become a recent friend. So I don't know what we're going to get into today, but we're going to get to some stuff. So anyways, I'm going to bring him on. Going on, Rene?
What's happening, my friend?
Not much. It's a kind of a interesting day in Alaska. We were supposed to have like the aurora borealis, but as things go in Alaska, it was all cloudy, windy, and rainy. So
which is funny because we're actually seeing it here. We're actually seeing which last night we ended up seeing that. Yeah, sorry. Just a clarification. I'm a dog brother. I'm not a DBMA guy.
I forget the distinction. Yeah.
Oh,
cool.
Dog Brothers, there we are, the sweaty, smelly psychopaths. And then there's the DBMA, which is the art that was derived from, Mark's study of the fights and whatnot.
Gotcha.
I'm not taking away from that, but I studied some DBMA, but I'm not a DBMA instructor.
Okay.
Per se.
It is the interesting thing about like the different flavors, different styles, even within underneath a larger umbrella of martial arts or any other method, that like you have the core system, which is the guy, and then you have all your subsets that are particular to a specific thing that they do. So
for sure. In the beginning of the Dog Brothers, I would say that maybe 80 or 90% of the guys were bikini guys.
Yeah.
And then that evolved. And then, we had the Thai arts with Chinese arts, which Gung Fu Dog brought in. And, in the back of our original shirts, it always said, Kali, Silat, Krabi Krabong, and others. So it wasn't so much, one art. It was just like, come to the barbecue and let's all eat.
Which, I mean, honestly, that is a fun way to do things. Because one, if you're not so focused on like, here's my tribe, here's my specific colors and whatnot, you can just like show up, share information, and just get on with it.
Absolutely.
And you just love what you do. And that's honestly how martial arts should be, away from like the combat specific, ego driven warfare specific things. When you're doing this as a thing to do, when you get to join together as a tribe and just express that's beautiful, and it's important.
I think what we forget, Kurt, is our similarities. And your system may have 26 attacks, bikini may have 64. Chinese Gung Fu may have 105. And again, I'm just throwing all these numbers out. But in the reality is that all boils down to the same equation when we actually fight.
Yeah, the human frame.
And, I have trained guys just using angles 1 and 2 that did really well against people who just did, 1,000 different scenarios. For me, I equated back to Krabi Krabong. The one thing I really loved about it, when I first started training it, my instructors are like, these generals that come into a village and they would show people like really basic shit, and if you survive, the next day I'll teach you more.
Yep.
And that's kind of like the way I think about the Dog Brothers. Is like, you may have this amazing idea of what you're going to do, but the first day you show up is when you're actually going to really take all your stuff and digest it and condense it into what is actually functional within our realm of stick fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and then build on it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting is we get good at what we do, and there's always and what we prefer and what we like. But the other side of that is based upon our experience, our education, and just like our physical composition. Like the human frame has such potentiality in movement and expression, but each individual person has a specific makeup to them, whether it is height and weight, injury, gender. I mean, there's just such interesting limitations because of the uniqueness of a person, but there's also the great opportunity.
Listen, the reason I love like fighting at gatherings, and the reason I love like my brothers and sisters out there is because we fight regardless of our of where we're at. Like I remember at the second tribal gathering ever, my friend Dean rode his motorcycle for like 3.5 hours,
Mm-hmm.
literally hopped off his bike and fought somebody.
Hell yeah.
And, it's like, and even when we're injured, you still fight. And I think that's what separates. And again, I don't want to shit on anybody and what your perception of what you do is, but I push myself and we push ourselves beyond the limits of what most people will.
Yeah.
So, I've fought with broken hands. I fought with broken fingers. I didn't even realize my arm was broken and I was fighting because I wanted to see how far I could push myself. And like, to me, the person that proved that thing the most to me is Grey Dog, Brett Sims. Like that motherfucker would fight 10 fights. And I mean, 10 fights back to back to back in the time where most of us were fighting 3 to 4. And I'm not talking like they would grab a sword or aluminum dagger or a knife and play around. Like to me, those aren't fights. That's just exhibitions. And that's the guy that pushed me to push myself farther. Like I became like the 3rd dog brother in Canada in 2010. I think he became the 6th or 7th dog brother in 2014, I think. And again, I might be mistaken. But that's the guy that made me rethink about how I'm fighting. And so, again, I'm not saying it's the smartest thing, but that's the guy who was my next step into really rethinking the way I should be fighting.
Yeah. Well, again, pressure testing is such a loaded subject, but the fact is you utilizing a blacksmithing metaphor, right? You have to put that blade in the forge, you have to hammer it out, and you have to apply heat and pressure to create this excellent tool. But again, you have to keep sharpening this tool, you have to keep putting some work in it, and the product is the result of the process. So yeah, that's awesome.
And you know what's funny about what you just said is that, so from the time that I became, when I started doing Dog Brothers to when I became a Dog Brother, I was like, oh, I'm here, what's next? Because I was like, I've made it, I might as well just like quit and do my do something else. But then I realized as you get older, you fight differently, or you have to fight differently because you don't have the speed, or you may not have the stamina and everything else. So you have to reinvent how you fight. And that's the beauty about it. It's like, I have to constantly reinvent myself and change the way I fight in order to fight and survive.
Yep.
Which a lot of systems don't teach.
Yep.
So, here I am, like I'm 52, turning 53 shortly. And I still enjoy it, and I still can get out there and still hold my own against people because I had to rethink the way I was taught. And that's the beautiful thing, about what we do. And it's a fantastic thing because a lot of systems are like, this is what you do, A, B, and C. And it's like, well, what happens when you're not as fast?
Right.
Oh, then you retire. It's like, fuck that.
Well, again, the why changes over time, and the why is specific to the individual at whatever point of their process. And what's interesting about consistently driving forward and reinventing yourself is I harken back to this wonderful poem, and I wish I remembered where it came from, but the basis is that be wary of the gray beard upon the field that is littered with the bodies of young men. Now, the other side of that for combat sports is be wary of the old guy in the gym where young men quit. And that old man, that graybeard, is the one that's constantly changing, constantly innovating, constantly has the dog in them that's willing to fight. And by process of staying with it, as messy as the process is, they've had to adjust, they've figured things out, and they are still there.
And the funny thing is, by no means do I consider myself the old man. But what I do consider myself is, as I've gotten older, and I mentioned this, I think, the other day when I was speaking with Dean on that podcast, I've become meaner. And I've decided, like I've learned through trial and error, like how to shut things off a lot quicker.
Yep.
Before I'd be like, yeah, let's go 25 rounds. I'm happy. Let's do this. But now I'm like, I want to take a nap later. So let's
yeah. No,
let's shut this off quick.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm still battling a lung infection, so
yeah, it's all good. I mean, it's part of the fun of traveling, but I'm glad you're still with us here after the fact. We can get into that story a little bit later if you're down for it, but just even with dealing with the lung infection, I'm glad you're here with us.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. So it's interesting talking about like the process and the different stages where we're at as young men leading into middle-aged men into older men. Is there's certain systems that you have to stop at a certain point, like Taekwondo, Olympic style Taekwondo. I'm not going to kick like that anymore. I don't have the acrobatics, the willingness, the stamina, or just the capacity to do that because I'm just not physically capable of doing that anymore. I mean, part of that's because of injury, a lot of it's because of weight. It's not there. Same with standing there with boxing. I mean, I have too many hip injuries that I can't stand there and bang. Yeah. So I've had to adjust what I do based upon the composition and limitation that I'm currently at. And where that comes to is I go to weapons and I stay within or if I'm going hands-on, I'm sticking with grappling. So, but that's something I've had to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that comes to like as a modern perception. That's absolutely true. I think in a ancestral, perception, I think that'd be different. If one of our ancestors got into a fight and they get to stab the person, they would just stab him. Like why fight this person? It's the same thing. Like if you can shoot the person instead of fighting him,
why not? Why not?
And again, I'm just talking about combat, and whatnot. And I think that's the way it was back in the day. And that goes to say, it's like, hey, man, like you have to look at some of these systems, look at the longevity of it. In a sport aspect, Taekwondo, man, you have to be stupid athletic and fly through the air and do a bunch of stuff. That's pretty cool. But again, at 52, it's not really my thing. I still do Muay Thai. I still box. I just started grappling again, which I'll tell you, like, I think I've quit grappling like 10 times. And now that I'm back, I can't, I hate it. I really do. Like, I love the practical, hey, we're rolling, but the warm-ups and shit, I don't want to crab walk around the gym. I do it just out of respect for my instructor. But God damn it, man, I hate it.
That's fair. I mean, the place that I like to grapple the most is actually hand fighting and clinch range, or right before we get to the ground. Because once we get to the ground, that things start to hurt. So, I don't like playing on the ground, but I like playing in the transitions. But that is stuff that I've had to figure out. Now, as regard to like the longevity of a martial art and specific to athleticism, I mean, given the places that we live, where winter is a little bit longer than other places, good luck trying to do aerial kicks when there's 6 feet of snow on the ground, when there's ice. When it's just, you have to contextualize the combat methodology based upon the circumstance of which you're in. And again, things that are highly tailored towards sport, they don't apply often.
And I'll say it this way, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But the second I believe what people tell me is the day that I'm going to start believing that I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
And the person that I look up to when it comes to this kind of stuff is like Guru Dan. We got a guy in his 80s, still moves around. You watch that dude throw a jab cross, and I had the privilege of hosting him a few times here in Toronto.
Yeah.
And you watch him hit a heavy bag, or when he's by himself and he's moving.
Mm-hmm.
He's not an 80-year-old man.
No.
He's a 20-year-old kid who's going to knock your fucking head off.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what I love about that guy. Like, besides his attitude towards everything, it's the fact that man, you could walk up and say, you're 86 or 85 or whatever the hell you are.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of looks at you and goes,
Yeah.
I'm a martial artist.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it.
It's
and
the ages of mindset.
Like, he would get out of the car and kind of, do a little like, my hips are locked up. And then you get into that seminar and you sit there, it's like, man, I suck.
Yeah, it's the whole ages of mindset. It's like just in the same. I've never had the opportunity or the honor to train with Grodan, but going through my process of Balintwalk and Asai, I mean, it's the same thing. Like GM Bobby, he's terrifying. He's not an 80-year-old man. Dr. Kelly Warden, he's not an 80-year-old man. That dude is terrifying. And having gone hands-on with both of them, yeah, it's the same situation. These men are just young men that just are still there.
They're going to be there until their last day, and that's the cool thing about it. And the thing is, they never call themselves master.
Yep. And
they never sit there and think of you as a lesser person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember I've trained with Grodan from like the 90s on.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen him for like 5 or 6 years, and he went into a room and he's like, "Hey, Rene, how you doing?"
Oh,
and I was like, and I wasn't like, "Oh my God, he remembered me." And I was like, I just remember thinking, how fucking polite is this guy that he actually chose to remember my name?
Right.
And it wasn't a big deal. I was just like, man, this guy's a human.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. And a lot of the, masters who go out there is telling me that they're masters are people I have zero interest in training with.
Yep.
Because they've lost that part. They don't train anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They'll show up at a seminar and get their seniors to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, fuck you, man. Why?
Yep. I'm totally down and agreeing with that. And the thing what I find is the men and women who are at that mastery level that don't rely on the title, they don't have a chip on their shoulder because they've been there, done that. They've spent their time in the ring. They've spent their time in the field. They spent their time in combat, actually utilizing their craft and additionally honing that craft to a level of perfection that they just don't care anymore of the ego trip because the body of work proves it. And I'm finding with people who have not fought or have not seen violence or have never been in combat, they have so much to prove. They have a big chip on their shoulder.
They will always try to justify to you how important what they're doing. And I find the number one people who tell me that, they don't have to train as hard as you did and they don't have to fight as hard as you did.
Yeah.
Are just people who don't actually want to do it.
Right.
So they're looking for like-minded people who can sit there and go, you don't have to fight to learn, to do whatever, or stick fight, or you have to be technical instead of being brutal.
Yeah.
Those are the people who actually don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. So they find a whole bunch of people who are in that group, and then they lump themselves into the category that people like the Dog Brothers are in. And that, to me, and as you've probably gotten to know me now, is something that bugs the shit out of me. I'm not saying you need to fight or you want to fight, but don't call your sparring or hard sparring or whatever the fuck you want to call it as, the same thing that we did, because it's not, and it never will be, no matter how many people get involved.
Agreed. Because I had to say it, there's only one Dog Brothers group. There's a lot of people who try to replicate it, but there's only one Dog Brothers group.
I think there's so many things that people forget that the Dog Brothers did for the FMA community. Number one is they blew it up.
Yes, they did.
So like in 1990, like 1989, 1990, when I was doing FMA and I would meet other Filipino people and say, "Hey man, I love this art. It's amazing." And they would look at me and it's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, like Kali, Screama, and they're like, "Oh, you mean the reenactors?"
Yeah.
Yeah. They honestly looked at those people like the Civil War reenactors out in the field.
Yep.
And it wasn't until, group and I have to say it, like whether you agree with me or not, the Dog Brothers brought it to light.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew things up. Like Bikiti got crazy. Then people started really getting into Illustrissimo, and after that, when like the late 90s and 2000s, that's when like there's an influx of different systems that came in.
Yep.
And that was pretty cool. And I think the people that opened the gate and held it open, at least, and didn't take credit for it, were people like the original Dog Brothers.
Agreed. So what's interesting, and I keep coming back to this, because what is the end state of FMA? Are you doing from a cultural perspective? Are you doing from military? Are you doing from law enforcement? But for Americans in the West who aren't going to go into very specific fields, who go into a martial art, they want something to prove their accomplishments in the process. So that's rank and that's competition. Specifically, like Americans, we love to compete and we love our medals, we love our trophies. And with a system that doesn't have a structure for competition, it dies. Because like wushu, for example, wushu is a great demonstrative art, but there's no fighting aspect to it that Americans gravitate toward. And I remember this because I used to do the NASCA tournaments, and wushu was all over the place, but nobody fought. So it withered away to a point. But even like systems like sport karate, that's why it really got big in the 70s, aside from all the kung fu flicks and everything else, Chuck Norris. It's because there was an end state. You could compete, you could fight. And with FMA, there's a few varieties of it, and it's gotten better over the years. But what Dog Brothers really proved is that there is an end state of what you can do with your craft. You can fight with it, and there's a structure to work with to get to that level.
Yeah, and also, to be 100% honest, if you look at the karate that was happening in the 70s compared to the stuff that's going down now, those guys were vicious.
That's my dad's era. That was my dad's era.
Like, because I used to like shit on karate people all the time, and then I had to retract my statements when I started looking at these 1970s guys, and I was like, they would kill me.
Dude, they're doing full slams on basketball courts. I mean,
and they were like kicking
crazy.
people in the face, and it's like you hit the ground, and they kick you in the face again. And I was like, that is so violent. I love it. It was just like amazing. And then you fast forward, and you're like, ooh, what happened? And then I think that's part of my. Sorry, man. Like this lung infection is killing me. When I started looking at the stuff that's going on now, especially with some of the FMA stuff, I was like, I don't want to get to what that evolution of karate was now. You know what I mean? Like I want to keep that shit normal. Like I want to keep it to what it was in the 80s when these guys got together. Yeah. Because, man, I see, like, again, if you want to do WCAF and you want to do point sparring, dude, go at it. I'm not going to sit there and crap on you. I think you're doing what you want to do, and please go ahead and do it. But just don't call it fighting, because it isn't.
Yep,
it is.
I agree. Because, I mean, look at the difference between, like, even HEMA and fencing. I mean, I actually should say Bowhurst versus HEMA versus fencing. Because they're all armored up in Bowhurst. HEMA's kind of armored up, and fencing is armored, but not really. But, like, Bowhurst, they're laying into people, full tilt and full armor, and they're getting in. And people actually are getting hurt because the level of intensity and intent is there.
Look at bare knuckle boxing and boxing.
Yep.
That shit is crazy. Like I look at these bare knuckle boxers, and I sit there and I'm like, there's a part of it I think is really beautiful. And people are like, oh, they're just brawlers or whatever, but it's like they're fighting.
Yeah, they're actually fighting.
And they're not, and they know that their hands are going to get busted up. Like, when you watch a bare knuckle boxing fight, those guys are bleeding.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, and it's evil. It's a beautiful thing.
Yep. So, so we're talking about the 70s. Like this, I mean, this is the 70s. This is the 80s. This is my dad's era, because my dad is a American Kempo black belt and a bunch of other things. But like, this is when he fought, and it's nuts.
It's a beautiful thing. Like, look at those guys.
Yeah. And same with the karate guys. I think the people who I really appreciate still within this level of intensity is the Kyokushin guys, because they're still laying into people.
Yeah, absolutely. Kaji Kembo guys are the same way. But yeah, look at that. Like that's there's nothing nice about this.
No,
and I bet you all those guys were terrified before they went to that match.
Absolutely. And just the same, talk about fighting. So, like, growing up, listening to my dad and training with him, is a lot of these tournaments, he would fight 15 to 20 fights in one tournament.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's full contact, and it was just, it's crazy. Like, the stories you tell me about the injuries and looking like how one side of his face is kind of sunken in from the amount of times his cheek has been crushed, like his nose is all permanently fucked up. It's just like, yeah, fighters, we're a little messed up inside. We're a little broken in the brain because we love this stuff. And because of this is why we are here today, because men and women who are this altered continue driving the methodology forward to allow us the privilege of doing it safely. But we need to keep this constant in the sphere of influence when it comes to martial arts and combat sport.
I look at it this way, man. Things start changing when you decide to start putting on more padding.
Yep.
Like, I guarantee these guys, they went from being bare knuckle to all of a sudden they have, like, padded gloves, and then they went with heavier gloves, and then there's this headgear, and it's like, hey, we're a cup, and then all of a sudden bigger headgear, and it's like, now we want you to stop after you hit. Yep. And that is the evolution or the de-evolution of an art, right?
Yep. And this is where, like, with going back with the FMA lineage, combat sports or combat approach. And again, a lot of people, when they look at FMA as competition, they look at weak half and then they see Dog Brothers. And a lot of people don't see the variety in between. And part of it, of course, is marketing and knowledge. But when it comes to the onset of introducing FMA to a soccer mom that's middle class in the West, is like, what is the end state for my young student going to be? Are they going to do the weak half stuff, which is fun, but it's not combat, or are they going to do the perception of what Dog Brothers does, which is crazy, but it's real? And not, again, it's that 80% in between.
I think it's an evolution. It's a self-evolution. For me, I don't really care about what people did beforehand. The fact that they seek people like myself or my brothers and sisters out is because that's the next step that they feel that they need to go to, because they feel that they've conquered or partook in what they did enough that they want to do this.
Yeah.
And they want to go to that different level. So, I don't try to convince anybody that they should do what I do or that we do. I'm just there to facilitate the transition.
Yeah.
So if you want to drive fast on the road and call yourself a race car driver, okay.
Yeah.
That's on you. That's not your fantasy, has nothing to do with me. But the day you say, hey, I want to go to a racetrack and learn this, then you need to seek those people out. And again, whether I piss people off or not, that's just the reality. I've had a lot of when I started Beat the Crap Out of Cancer, when three of us started Beat the Crap Out of Cancer in 2009.
Yeah,
we had our first day. We had 47 fighters show up. In the beginning, I'd say about 30% were wearing the kimonos, the sparring kimonos, which I didn't give a shit about. And by the end of the day, nobody was wearing any gear.
Yeah.
And we went from 48 fighters the first year to 125 the second.
Yeah.
And there wasn't one kimono there or one weak half helmet there. It was all about
fencing, mask, and gloves. Here we go.
I want to go. I want to experience this. And we always told people this is not a Dog Brothers event.
Yeah.
It was created by Dog Brothers, by myself, Tyler Morton, and Linda Matsumi. And it was an end for us to build the Dog Brothers in many ways.
Yeah.
But, people just, they were like, hey, man, like, okay, I survived this. Now I want to move forward. So we had a lot of, and again, for the first 5 years, we had between 125 to 175 people show up, which for an FMA event or
that's
for
huge.
A stick fighting event is fucking insane.
You don't hear like those kind of numbers, especially when it comes to
no. And the only time it started dying down, between politics and everything else, is when the events started going national and global.
Yeah.
So even now, there's global events that have like 25, 30 people show up. Man, you have a hard time getting 25 or 30 people in for a seminar.
Right. Unless you have like the big draw names, but then again, there's no fighting with those big draw names.
No, this is all about experimentation and learning, expressing yourself through the art that you're taught. and it doesn't matter whether it's Balintawak, Bakbakan, you know, KI, Bikini, like it doesn't fucking matter. It's just everybody got together, nobody drew any flags, and we went out and we did our thing.
Yep.
Like I said, like my biggest event that I ever had, I think it was Beat the Crap Out of Cancer 4 or 5. We had 175 people show up.
That's crazy.
From all over the world that came in just to go to this event for a non-sanctioned full contact event.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. So
yeah. And the fact and what it and we talk about often, depending upon what it is, but the demographic is there. You got the 80%, and within the 80%, you got the 10% who shouldn't be there, but the 80% are your bread and butter. Then you got the 9% who is those soldiers, fighters who are going to be there. Then you got your 1% who is straight up the killers, the champions, the grandmasters. But again, we're such a small cross section of people that actually make it to that next stage of their martial arts progression, their combat sports progression. But when you get enough of them in the room,
you know what's funny, Kurt, is that 10% that you were mentioning, most of those are the ones that will actually go to full dog brother.
Yeah,
because the grandmasters are too arrogant to think that they're that they're going to do it. Yeah. The other ones who think are straight up killers just aren't.
Yeah.
And the people who are just starting this off just because they want to try it are the ones that actually realize that they have the potential to do it. And those are the ones that become the true killers, like monsters, in my opinion. Like I've had guys who show up in like full body gear, like RoboCop, kind of like walking. And then like 5 years later, I look at that guy across the field. I'm like, that guy's a full dog brother now.
Yep.
And the guys who were like, the grandmasters are like, well, I could have been there, but I'm too real. It's like,
no,
you just thought you were.
Get on the field.
And it's the perception of the people around you. At no point did I join the Dog Brothers thinking that I want to be a Dog Brother. I just wanted to see if I could survive this shit.
Yep.
And there's easier ways of me becoming a Dog Brother. I just got to give myself a name, and then go from there. I was just lucky enough to go through progressions and the trials, and move forward, sort of thing.
So with that, with the long history that you've had with Dog Brothers and the way that Dog Brothers has evolved in the past 20 years, are you seeing now that there is kind of like a path that hijacks that process where they get a quick jump ahead of the line to get that title of Dog Brother, or has it actually gotten better?
No, there is no quick way around it.
Okay.
And the people that think they get a quick way around it, they learn the hard way. So we had a discussion here in Canada a while back, and I was just like a third party, kind of looking out at the fights. And we got all our full Dog Brothers together, and I said, we're not keeping up to par. And I showed a video of what we used to be like. And it went from like, hard fights to like insane fights overnight. Because that's the standard that we want to that's the standard that we want. We don't want just someone who shows up and fights and has, like the perfect smile and you're doing great.
Yeah.
I need to honor the people that were there before me. Arlen, Eric, Mark, Philip, these are the people that are friends of mine. Or most of them are friends of mine now, and I want to honor what they started. And if I don't do that, or if we don't do that, then we might as well pack it up.
Right.
And the gatherings that we've been having lately, it's mashed up bones, bruises, and you're not moving properly the next day.
Yeah.
That's what the original. It might be friends, and at the end of the day. But we're going to push each other to the limit, and I think that's the beautiful thing about it. And I think that's what's keeping us honest. Like the Euros, man, those guys fight like motherfuckers. The US guys, they mash it up, and I want to make sure that when the Canadians go anywhere, that they scare people.
Yeah.
Because, and again, as friends,
No, but
You
the
know,
fact is, you guys carry a name, you carry a lineage, and you carry a pride about you of what you guys represent. So why not represent that properly? And
well,
it's not an ego thing. Yeah.
it's like any
Yeah.
military group. You know, like,
Hmm.
do you want the Navy SEALs to be like the laughing stock of the SA community?
Hmm.
No. Like, same with like the JTF2 here and all the other stuff. They pride themselves, and we pride themselves on who we are.
Hmm.
And when you say we are not those people, then we welcome you as a friend to teach
Hmm.
us otherwise.
Yep.
And
And
I'm cool with that. And if you teach me that I haven't been at the level that I'm supposed to be at, then that means I need to get my ass back into the lab and everything else. And like, I'm lazy. I'm lazy as fuck. And when I feel that someone's gotten the better of me,
mhm,
it's my duty to get better to make them better afterwards. You know, like
yeah,
when I fought Top Dog, um, he looked at me like literally we're on the field, we're about to fight, and I'm shitting my pants because I'm so nervous about fighting this guy who's a
hmm,
goddamn legend in what we do. And he looked at me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, Rene, it's my duty as your friend and brother
hmm,
to hit you as hard as I possibly can.
yep,
And I
yep,
hope we can have fun. And he put his mask on, and like the hairs on my arm are still standing up right now when I say this. Like I ended up with 4 broken ribs.
yep,
And it was like the most beautiful thing ever. Because it was so honest, right? And I was like, man, like I thought I was doing really great until this guy, I was in my 40s, he was in his 60s, and he destroyed me. Like
yeah.
just destroyed me. And I
It's
was
that
like,
bond.
this is good. This is a good
It,
thing.
no, it's beautiful. It's bonding through violence. I mean, we talk about beautiful violence when it comes to combat sports, and when we come to this higher level of combat activity. But the fact is that shared suffering structure builds these beautiful bonds that last forever.
Well, isn't
And
that the way tribes were? Like, tribes didn't
yes,
sit there and make themselves weaker.
no,
They're like, hey man, go fight that guy, the guy with 3 teeth
hmm,
and half a leg. Really? Like, what do I get out of that? And then you come back with you're missing 2 teeth and a quarter leg, and you're
hmm,
like, I get it,
yep,
because that's what's going to keep us on the right path,
yep,
and that's what we need to do. And I think anything, and that's part of the, when I always say like we're in the disco era of martial arts, we
hmm,
love things that are flashy,
hmm,
and we all want to dance together. But we need to make sure that the message that we send and the things that we teach, especially,
hmm,
are going to work.
absolutely, because the authenticity, the the responsibility of knowledge, both with knowing things about people and situations and the truth behind that, but also the responsibility of sharing knowledge and being a facilitator of knowledge and having the professional honesty and integrity to make sure that we are not putting out bullshits, but if we and making sure that it stays true to the path.
Kurt, how many videos do you see on a daily basis where it's just content,
Hmm.
and because you're nice to that person, you know them, you're polite?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
and
not.
yeah, I
And
get
and,
that.
and and I know a lot of my friends out there who are put out content, and if I like them, I'll send them a message
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, dude, man."
I mean,
Right?
arguably,
And it's not because I'm not good, because I'm
yeah.
not. It's because I'm tired. I'm super tired
Hmm.
of seeing people teaching shit that can get people killed.
I mean, arguably, I've been on that end, not from you directly, but like I've been on that end of critique by others of the stuff that I put out. There's a reason why I put out more comedy and satire because that's easier for me to communicate to people. But yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, it is the responsibility as a content creator to make sure I'm putting out something that's not going to waste your time.
No, I think it's different if you sit there and go, "Hey, this is a drill I'm working on, but this
Hmm.
is not a combative drill."
Yeah.
It's like when I go to the range and I got IPSC guys give me a hard time compared to
Hmm.
people who are actually been in combat.
Yeah.
It's like if they say, "Hey, this is how I do my IPSC drills," cool.
Yeah.
But when they start telling me this is how I do combat drills, I'm like, "Hey, you know what? Talk to this guy."
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to the professional.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have plenty of stories about that. But no, it's like I just get sick and tired of hearing a lot of this stuff because people are getting taught how to get someone else killed.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I've lived in a certain level of reality, I think, long enough through the places that I lived in and the violence that I witnessed, where it's like that shit just won't work.
Yep.
Like it's Hollywood, it's great, and it goes back to even with Kabir Wrong. It's like when the wars were over and you had these instructors hanging out, and they made up a lot of shit. They made it up because they needed to make a living.
Yep. And it's interesting talking about like the esoteric, flowery extra curriculum for a economic structure, because again, old warriors need to make income, and you see this explosion of systems and curriculums, which is interesting because combat's really simple. I mean, fighting is really simple, but it's not easy because the principles are unified based upon the human frame, physics, and just the physical world that we live in. You'll always see that going to the outside line is advantageous. Getting beyond that, the weapon limb and creating physical barriers is advantageous. You find that combat starts at a distance, so closing the gap and using the tools appropriate is a sound principle. So like all these things are there, but when people try to add the extra stuff with the technique specific thing and not actually paying attention to the principle and the concept, they that's great for marketing, but it's not truth, because the truth is,
I am perfectly cool with you making shit up and drills and everything else and whatever fantasy drills they are. I am 100% cool with that as long as you tell me I made this up.
Yeah.
And this is what I think could happen.
Yep.
Right. And then because the reality, Hollywood and reality are two separate things. So if you're like, hey man, I made up this drill, which is really cool because we get to work on, whatever, hand-eye, but it's just a cool drill because it keeps you moving. Yeah, I'll do it with you 100%. But if you start telling me, oh yeah, Rene, when 10 guys attack you and one of them has a hatchet and the other guy has a gun at your head, just do like your
just do this,
and you'll survive. And it's like, really? And again, it just bothers the hell out of me because it's just so unrealistic, and it's just going to get you hurt.
Yep.
And it might even get you killed. And the people who will suffer are the people around you.
And what's interesting, so talking about the transition and your priority of training, because as we age, we can't stick around and bang like we did in our 20s, so we have to get things done quickly and efficiently and effectively so we can move on to the situation. So, and you state this a lot, that as you've gotten older, you've gotten meaner. Can you explain, just for my audience here, what that means?
Well, it's real simple. Where there might have been a conversation when I was younger, it's no longer a conversation for me. And not to incriminate myself too much, but it's like, if someone posts up to me because they're bravado and everything else, they're getting hit.
Yeah.
When I was bouncing, I remember one time I was talking to somebody and I was trying to, in Toronto at 145, your beer has to be off the table. If you're holding on to one, I have to take it away. And I remember saying, hey, dude, I got to take that beer away. And he raised his hand like this. And before his beer got to his face, he got knocked out.
Yeah.
That to me is what I mean by getting meaner.
Okay.
And where before I might think of what's a really good 3-4 hit combination? It's like, what is a really good thing that stopped this person from wanting to engage with me?
Yep.
So, and that's it. Actually, it was really nice because it condensed. It really boiled down everything I know into this, remove the filler, and just and do the work and just kind of get over it.
Yep.
I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
no, it makes a lot of sense because what is interesting at a young man's stage, we want to sit there and bang, we want to sit there and test, we want to do the ego thing. We're a martial artist, we're a combat sports athlete. We want to sit there and do the cool flashy stuff because we can, we're athletically capable. But as we get older, again, due to age, injury, and whatever limitation, we have to condense stuff down to make it work. Like in case for me here in Alaska, we are a constitutional carry state. We have things that like to eat you, and we have some very interesting people up here as it is anyways. So and on top of all that, I can't dance around in the snow and the ice. So I'm going to go to guns. I'm going to go to the tools available to me that is more advantageous for me to win in the situation, especially the fact when I got my wife and my kids with me. I have to have those force.
Then it gets worse. Then you become nastier.
Yep.
You know, it's funny that you say that. Like pre-gatherings, I always watch really like messed up videos to get myself into like a weird headspace. And one of the things I love watching is road rage videos gone wrong.
Yep.
And one of my favorite ones is where a guy comes out with a pipe and he's like, I'm going to kill you. And the guy just steps out of the car and pulls his pistol out.
Yep.
And it's like, done deal. You know, and it's the same thing. Like, that's the kind of mentality that I kind of instill in myself, where it's like, I'm not going to get into I'm showing off. This is who I am. Do you have any idea who I am? You know how bad I am? You know, whatever. Yeah. It's like, no. You unfortunately get to taste the fruit before it got picked. It's like you are done. Yeah. And that's what I absolutely love. And and I wish I had the same mentality when I was younger, because then it would have avoided a lot of bullshit.
But in the same, having gone through that bullshit, because like in dealing with the path of resiliency and confidence through capability and facing adversity, would you say that facing all that bullshit in the past has informed how you are today?
Well, it's a good question, strange question, because and again, and as I've mentioned before, and you and I have chatted, I grew up around a lot of violence growing up, and I'm not going to sit here and go, that's why I'm so fucking cool, and that's why I know what I know.
Yeah.
I just have a different perception of what violence is than most people do. I just won't put up, or the second I feel threatened, I react. It's just the way it is, and I've been like that for the larger part of my life, and again, I'm not thinking it's cool, because God damn it, I wish I didn't have to ever go through that nonsense. But I think a lot of people are willing to engage with somebody longer than I would. Yeah. Like if you came out of the car and ran at me, and you're yelling at me and you're raising your fist, and my kids are in the car, if I can't run you over, then you and we're working. Yep. And I'm going home. Yep. I just don't give a shit that way. Yep. So and I hope that answers your questions.
No, that does, because again, it's straightforward and to the point. It's candid, because again, what we have done informs what we do. And what's interesting is when we make that transition. So you see a lot of people, and again, talk about cycles of abuse, cycles of trauma, getting into some like Pop 101 psychology. But the fact is, cycles of trauma has a couple of options. We either shut down, we do the complete opposite, or we go further into it. And going the complete opposite creates a problem. Being stuck in that trauma creates a problem, or we go further into it and actually turn that pain into beautiful purpose.
Yeah, and part of it too is, as much as it sucks, is like growing up in that kind of trauma sometimes brings things overboard, right? Yeah. Like I know a lot of people who would probably not have gone to jail if they didn't have to go through the shit that they went through. Yeah. You know, like I had a really good friend of mine who ended up going to jail for stabbing people with a screwdriver because he felt threatened. Yeah. Yeah. It's nuts, right? Like where you and I would have been able to talk out of it, he was at that level of trauma where he was like, my safety and health are being taken away, so I got to take theirs away.
Yeah. And the thing for me, and I don't talk about this often because it's hard for me to talk about, but I went through a major transition when I went into the Army. The Army reprogrammed and caused some other program, but it changed my perspective on how I'm going to handle things violently. Focused into more of an oath and purpose standpoint, but also my priorities shifted because I was in the military. Prior to that, I mean, I got into some serious hood rat shit. I mean, I was homeless. I did a lot of gangbanging. So like my reasons for doing it was very hijacked into violence for survival, because I just had to be. So, and when I transitioned into the army, I went through a significant change. Like, I changed my accent, I changed the way I dress, changed the way I interact with people, adopted into that culture. And now on my second half, after I've come back from my suicide attempt and death, as I've continued to change, but I have to keep in mind where that came from is from way the fuck back here that has led me here today. But where I had to tap back into that is living up here in my lovely little bubble of Alaska. As when I went down south a couple of years ago with my wife and my kids, visiting family and dealing with things, it's like, well, this is like how I grew up again, because all of that external input is being readdressed, and it,
Well,
like,
it never goes away.
It never goes away, and it got turned back on, and it's like, well, okay, I am not so happy and resilient as I were up here, because the shit is right there. So I'm tapping into that monster again. So,
well, I think number one is I'm glad that you never did.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I am proud of you for recognizing and moving forward. And, you know, that shit happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, dude, like it's a hard one because it hits home for me as well.
Yeah.
You know, I used to love to be a shit disturber. Not because I want to be in gangs, because it's just the way I enjoy my life.
Yeah.
But you went into a place that had more structure and got you out of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm glad you got out. And I'm glad that you got a different way, and I'm glad that you still recognize that stuff is still out there.
Yep.
But there's, you know, you saw a different way of getting out of it.
Yeah,
and you move forward.
And I did, and thank you very much. And I've had to prove that each day, given this second opportunity, this last opportunity, to make sure to go back to that. Now, what's interesting is that little window of hood rat shit, that was only maybe a year and a half of my life, because prior to that, it was somewhat structured. But I was sent away to live with family, and things just got worse. So running away from family, I got into that cycle. And then at the last opportunity, it's when I went into the military. So there was a little blip of my life that I was really fucked up. And the other one too about it is because I was good at fighting and I liked it, I transitioned to that darkness of like, I like hitting people. I like hurting people because I'm good at it. And that's a very scary, dark place. And this is what's really informed my perspective as to like, one, dealing with knife shit and dealing with violence is like, well, this is the way I would have done it because it's the way I've done it, or the way I've seen it done, and how I have it done to me. And this is where I go to this mindset of, if I'm using FMA in warfare, I'm already wrong, because that has a specific viewpoint versus this is violence.
So listen, man, like it literally gave you what I see, what I hear you saying to me is that you were lucky enough and unlucky enough to see what that kind of behavior is, what the reality is. So that gives you the opportunity to teach people what the reality of that behavior is really like.
Yeah.
Which is not a lot of people, not a lot of instructors have that. I guarantee you, 90% of the people that I know, and I'm not shitting on them, never went through that. So how can they teach you what it's really like? It's not. It's regurgitation from people like you that tell them that this is what violence is like. So consider yourself lucky that you're actually able to tell people what it's really like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, because of that, this is the reason why I use the rubber chicken, because I'm able to bridge that evil dark shit, but actually talk about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't see it, but that's the reason why I do it. I bring that up often.
It's hard to talk about a lot of that darkness, you know, like I mentioned this the other day with Dean's podcast, you know, like the first time I saw someone get shot, I was my son's age and he was 5.
Yep.
And it's like, I relate that to my son. I sit there and go, shit, man, I was his age when I saw someone get shot. And then I look at my daughter who was 8, and it's the first time I saw someone fight with machetes.
Yep.
And it's like, for the average person, that's kind of like, that's way out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I'm cooler because I saw it. I just want to let you know how I felt and the things that I saw when I saw it.
Yep.
So, I think that's part of our job is to take the experiences that we've had as humans,
Mm-hmm.
apply to our training,
Mm-hmm.
and say, I'm going to show you something. Please listen to what I'm saying because out of experience,
Mm-hmm.
digest it as you will, and apply it as you will.
Yep. And this is where I go back to this, as silly as it sounds, but why we fight is based on love. For one, the love of what we do, and more importantly, for whom and what we love. Because as fathers, it's up to us to make sure that we're physically capable, emotionally, spiritually, all these things capable enough to fill our purpose, especially if we have this knowledge and experience to carry forward. And that purpose is to protect those whom we love.
Yeah. See, for me, it was after I spent a good 20, 30 years in the martial arts, and I realized that the stuff I was being taught may not be as real as I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was a place like the Daw Brothers that was like it was like a home for me.
Yeah.
Like they're like, hey man, come here and really test what you think you know, and we're not going to judge you on it. We just want you to come out and do it.
Yeah.
And which is a lot of places in martial arts now don't do it.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of places are like, hey man, we're all the same, and love and peace, and we're all going to be technical when we fight. And if you hit me, so we're going to laugh and like, oh, you hit me.
Yeah.
And
No.
and that's why I honestly, it's never mind a pet peeve. It's something that drives me absolutely fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
But when I meet up with my brothers and sisters and they beat the shit out of me,
Yeah.
it makes me realize how wrong I was with some concepts or what I thought my reality was at that point.
Yep. And again, it's building a tribe of consciousness of one, building boundaries, building accountability, and holding each other to the standard by forcing us to get to that standard. And part of that is teaching us to maintain that standard by forcing us to do the difficult thing. Overall, men and women should do difficult things. Because again, if we're stagnant, not learning, and not progressing, then what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah. Hey, listen, man, that's one of the reasons, like even with beat the crap out of cancer,
Yep.
I said men and women will fight at the same level. And we started doing this at the Canadian gatherings as well, because most women will get attacked by men.
Yeah.
So they got to deal with the fact that they are being attacked by men.
Yeah.
And the women fighters that we are producing are fucking top notch, man. Like they will mash you up because that's what we do. We teach
Yep.
reality, and we live by that. It's been such a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, because like, again, one of the weird concepts with just society in general is that men are protectors. That's all they do. But the fact is, women are protectors as well. When people forget about life on the frontier, it is the fact that when man was away hunting and doing whatever, mama at home had to be there with a shotgun and maintain the household. So they both have to equally be capable in their own right, in their own ways.
You got to look at society, like old societies, and men and women fighters, and you actually start realizing a lot of that stuff was stuff that was brought up afterwards, and it's just bullshit. Because women have the ability, and I find women more vicious than men.
Yep.
They will get the job done.
Yep.
Guys will fight out of ego. Women will fight out of survival.
Yep.
And when you fight out of survival, you fight a lot harder.
Yep. Yeah.
Like my wife has fought at gatherings, and when I watch her fight, I'm like, God damn, she wants to kill that person.
Well, a friend of mine named Jen Marie, she's a Krav Maga instructor and a phenomenal athlete and just phenomenal operator because she deals with the Underground Railroad, dealing with human trafficking. She's a badass in her own right. And what she put it is that men get to fight because of the ego. Women must fight because they have the skills, physicality deficit of being a woman. Because if they fail, it's much further of an issue for them, especially when their children are involved. Because men, that's tricky in the aspect of like same thing with men. When men fail, those who they love and are sworn to protect also have a trickier circumstance. But because the mentality of men is we tend to fight out of ego when we're young, we get to do that versus we must do that because we have a biological imperative as a maternal individual.
Oh, understood.
Yep. Uh-oh.
Still here. Hold on 1 second.
Yep, that's fine.
I don't know what happened. Here we go.
It's okay. Technology, and I can edit that out anyways. So, so anyway, so with that, do you want to bring up the story? Because, I mean, you've talked about this a few times on a few other places, but for the sake of my own audience, are you willing to share what happened to you here recently?
Oh my God. Listen, my life is a country song. So it's got to be like 3-4 weeks ago now. I was selling a vehicle, and I reluctantly went to someone else's compound. And when I got there, I ended up being like carjacked. So I got jumped by 6 guys, and it was one of those really funny things where it was like I mentioned yesterday, well, the day before, excuse me, where, at 52, the last thing you think you're going to do is get into a brawl with people.
Yep.
But I got jumped by a bunch of people that tried to take my vehicle away from me. And luckily, I was able to get back into my vehicle and drive away. But yeah, it's I got jumped by a bunch of guys trying to take my car. And then that actual week, I had to take an emergency flight back to Spain, where I'm from, to escort a bunch of squatters out of my mom's house, which is one of the reasons Dean Franco and a lot of the other dog brothers put a fundraiser together for me. I ended up having to spend a few weeks back in Spain, removing squatters and rebuilding my mom's house that got trashed. So it's been a
hectic couple of weeks, and the real is still real.
It's honestly, it's just like I sit there and I'm like, what did I do in a past life that warrants that kind of stuff? But yeah, it was pretty nuts, man. Like especially the carjacking it was like it was nuts. Like again, I live in Milton, so I live in a suburb outside of Toronto, about an hour outside of Toronto, which is really mellow, and that's why I moved out here with my family and kids. And this guy was like dying to buy my truck, and I went to this complex, and the second I got out, I got jumped.
Yeah.
And like I got worked over. Like I got worked over good. And it wasn't until I realized what was actually happening. And again, my mentality is I live in a suburb, everything's cool, to like, holy shit, I'm back in the ghetto.
Yep.
And I managed to fight my way back to my vehicle and get away. And like I was saying yesterday at in the podcast, like I was supposed to go to a kid's birthday party.
Yeah.
And I showed up and I was like all busted up, bloody, and my wife was like,
what's going on?
What are you doing here? It's like, I'm here for the birthday party. It's like, you are
fucked up.
You are fucked up. You're like covered in blood. And like I cleaned up, but I ended up having to leave, but it didn't register that actually happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty nasty. It got crazy. And then again, I never had a chance to like absorb what actually happened when I had to like take an emergency flight to Spain.
Yeah.
And take care of a whole bunch of like gypsies that had broken into my mom's house and were squatting in it and destroyed it. And that's another story where I literally spent 2 weeks like sleeping on an air mattress with a knife in my hand, waiting for people to break back in.
Yep.
And again, I don't think I'm cool by it or anything else, but I have to go back to where I grew up. Just again, I grew up below the world and everything else. And the conflict I was used to growing up in, and the fact that I was able to deal with that and not make it a big deal. It's like, it's just, this is the way life is going to be right now.
Well, capable and willing, because the fact is there's a lot of men who are capable and unwilling. So that speaks to your integrity and just you as a human being. So
I remember talking to you before I left.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
You had said, "Hey man, I heard this happen." And it's just like, it was a matter of fact conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, my mom's place got broken into. I got to bounce. And you and I will have that podcast some other time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I never felt like I'm cool or anything else. Like I was scared shitless.
Yeah.
Because there's a voice in the back of my head saying, "You're not coming back from this."
Yeah, you could fucking die. Yeah. You could fucking die.
Yeah, and dude, I got a 5 and an 8-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it just blew my fucking mind. Like, I'm like, shit, I'm going through this.
Yeah, and again, that's the whole thing about the reasons why. The reasons why we do things, for one, is honor integrity, and it's the right thing to do. Because, again, you have the capability, therefore there's a responsibility. But the willingness aspect, that's the hard part for a lot of men who have the capability and the responsibility to tap into. Because you got a lot of people.
Let me tell you one thing, man. Like, and again, because I was going through this shit, and it was like, to say it was insane, it was an understatement.
Yeah.
But, people like Dean Franco, who would reach out and say, "How you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what do you need?
Yeah.
How can I help you?" Or it's like, "Hey, we're having a class on, like Saturday." And I remember like sitting on an air mattress, holding onto this like blade that I bought, and sitting in the middle of a dark apartment.
Yeah.
And having people like Dean, like, just teach a class. And I was like, I feel like these people actually like take care of you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which meant a lot.
Yeah. Again, tribe of consciousness.
Yes.
That is beautiful. Because again, we uplift, we build boundaries, but we also build accountability and we support each other. Because it sounds esoteric, sounds woohoo, but the fact is, as I've come back to social media, come back to the FMA community, come back to the world in general, is I have some really strong barriers of whom and what I will allow it to influence me and participate in my life. And that's important because it helps me keep accountable to the things that I made a promise to and the things I'm trying to do. And this is important that we surround ourselves with those people who are not just yes men, but men and women who will say, "Hey man, we got you, but here's the standard of how we got you. But anyways, we'll show up with a shovel, but we got you."
I think that's what we need to do is like, it's like stop fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Figure out where we want to stand with what we want to do, and just be realistic with each other and actually do it.
Yeah.
So not everybody has to go out there and fight dog brothers. Not everybody has to go out there and do whatever. But support each other. Because we don't. We do the opposite. My system is better than yours. This, that, and the other. And it's all bullshit. Like, if we actually all got together and support each other, we would be so far ahead.
Yeah.
Like, there wouldn't be 5 people watching our show. And again, I have no idea how many people are watching. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
There'd be like 100 people saying, "Fuck yeah, man. Like, let's do this."
Yeah.
And then I would be more than happy to say, "Hey, you don't want to fight full contact, but you want to do this?
Cool.
How can I help you?"
Yeah.
Right. But we don't do that. That's the problem with martial arts these days.
Yep.
We don't give a shit about each other.
And a lot of it is also comparative ego, because comparative valuation of like, I expect to be as good as you, or I don't view you as good as me. And therefore we have this identity crisis of like, we're comparing ourselves to other people, and there just creates unhappiness in general, versus like celebrating in everybody being unique and have something to offer, because we all have something to share into the collective community that is our wonderful FMA community, let alone our community in general, because everybody's slightly different and comes with different life experiences and different education. So give them an opportunity to speak, because here's the other one too. Compassion and empathy cost you nothing but time and surrendering the ego. And by building compassion and empathy, the way you do that is by sharing stories, building a human connection, and just like spending that time with a person to actually understand who and what and where their truth comes from. Because like, here's another one. A while ago, actually, when I first met you, I was really annoyed by you. And you can guess why, because you can guess why. But I was really annoyed with you for quite a long time. And then as I got to know you better, and by listening and just by our conversations, like, I got over that, because I understand why he is the way he is. And I also got rid of my own like issues with you. And so this is where I'm at now, sharing conversation with you and I in general support, because I got to know you. Versus just the surface level of like, oh, you're wearing that brand of logo and I'm wearing this brand of logo, and now we have conflict. Like that's all surface level, versus like actually getting to know somebody and talking to them. That's how you build a bond. That's how you break down barriers. So.
Hey, listen, you know what the worst part about being my friend is? It's being my friend.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just, and again, like, I have to remind people, like, I've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I don't give a shit about people's personal feelings. I care about the facts.
Yeah.
And there are things that I believe that most people will not believe, and everything else, and that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think you and I, as martial artists, should be able to find a happy medium with that.
Yep.
But I don't believe in telling people lies. It's just it's the truth is so much easier to remember. And if I piss you off, then I want you to tell me why I pissed you off, and at least we can have a conversation.
Yep. And
I luckily, what happened is you and I had a big roll around where you can actually figure things out, where I didn't piss you off anymore. But I don't know. I just don't care about people's feelings.
Yeah, and for me, what it was is twofold. One, I figured out what it was that was pissing me off about you and got over it. And more importantly, what I figured out is this is how you are, and that's something I can understand. Versus like what I was trying to perceive you to be and what I wanted you to be. But once I accepted, like, this is how you are, I know how to operate within that bubble. Check, gotcha.
But I am kind of curious as to how I pissed you off now.
I mean, like you said some inflammatory shit on some other podcast, and it's like, well, I had to think about where I was at that day. I was probably already pissy about a subject, and just, there's a lot going on, versus like sitting back and thinking about it. Like, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Move on. So, and it's just the same, like surface flyby comments, because this is just a good commentary about the comment section in general. People get hijacked based upon what gets said in the comment section by not actually what they see, but are not actually thinking about it and talking about the quality of praise or criticism, and actually just getting past that reactionary, that emotional response, and actually sitting there and critically and analyzing it and figure out whether it is something to be upset or something to engage.
You know what's funny, Kurt, is that the last podcast that I had with Dean, some people got really pissed off at me for just like talking about training, and saying that you need to be able to train people beyond the martial arts aspect, but the legal aspect, whatever. And I got slammed by a bunch of shit, by people. And I was like, and I always tell people, if I'm wrong, tell me how I'm wrong, but like prove that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because if I'm wrong, I'll be the first guy to apologize to you. But if I'm right, like, don't tell me that like you're whatever that you're teaching, like, and excuse me, like there's a few people out there that were like posting like, "Hey man, fuck you," and if that's what you actually think is going to happen when I get multiple attackers, and it just went on and on and on. I was like, and I was laughing. I'm like, you had an opportunity to like jump in and tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like, and I will be happy to say, okay, I will look at what you say and say I'm wrong. But if I'm not, then fuck you, man. Like, you have to look at yourself and realize that what you're teaching people is death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. And anyways, like, I'm glad that you and I had the opportunity to, switch that over.
Yeah, me too. Because the fact is, holding negative energy toward a person is a lot to carry, and I don't have the time or energy to do it anymore. So it's easier for me to get over this shit and just like, let's make a cool friend out of it.
Yeah,
So
and again, like if you were specifically going to tell me this is what I didn't like you for or whatever, I would either have to try to defend it or just say you're right. Because you know what? Sometimes I go off on a tangent and sometimes I'm wrong. And, I used to drink before too. So that could be
yeah, again, that's probably
that could be a point as well. Like, God damn it. There's a few podcasts I've been on where I don't even remember being on.
Yeah.
And this is before I quit drinking. So
congratulations, by the way.
But it's like, hey man, it is what it is.
Yeah. And this is a comment about education. Okay, the Socratic method is how you learn through disagreement and conversation, and you learn to be critical of not just the other person but of yourself, and actually have the opportunity to sit in the moment and engage with the conversation and lose. It's good. I was bullshitting in between. It's going to get edited out anyway. So, what were we talking about?
We were talking about good looks and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Oh yeah, good hair care.
Yeah.
So yeah, like talking about podcasts and saying shit during a podcast and being Socratic method. That's what I was getting on. Is Socratic method is being able to defend you and be critical of the other person, but be critical of you and actually holding space to have a conversation that's not going to devolve into ego and anger. And I feel like people would do better if they actually had that approach, because the problem that we run into with the dynamic of education is you have these instructors who are supposed to be a facilitator of information telling you what to think and how to think versus just presenting you information of what to think about and finding your own answers thereafter.
You know what's funny about that? I never tell my students what to think or what or anything else or look anything else. Again, like look anywhere. I just give them my 2 cents.
Yep.
And then they can decide whether or not it's true or not.
Yep.
And a lot of the time they find out how true it is through my classes.
Yeah.
Like I don't personally give a shit what people think about me anymore, or what people think in general. Like it is what it is. Like you come to my class, you do what we do. And then you decide whether or not it's for you or not. And if it isn't, leave.
Yeah, you have the opportunity. You have the free will to just move out.
From the second that you meet me, you have the chance to just leave. And that's what I love. And, I meet people that actually heard of me and they want to train with me. And they're like, I heard this, I heard that. And I just tell them, like, I don't care. Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
You want to train? Cool. If not, like, get back in your car and fuck off.
Yeah.
Because, Kurt, I have a fucking day job.
Yeah.
And I don't care what people think.
You have a wife and kids.
I'm very comfortable with what I know. And if you don't like it.
Oh, and the priorities are specific to you and to them. And if they happen to line up, cool. If not, it's not that big of a deal.
There's so many people out there. Like, I remember like people talking to, they were talking to like former students of mine. Like, oh, that guy retired and he doesn't do anything. It's like, I never retired.
Yeah.
I'm just very specific in who I fight and who I actually want to teach.
Well, and again, you don't do this for a living, because this is an interesting dynamic within the martial arts community in general. You have the people who do this as their bread and butter, their primary source of income. Then you have the hobbyists, and then you have the people that are very specific of who they train, where this isn't their primary source of income.
Yep.
And I'm on that end at this point in my life because I don't have the gym, I don't have the team, and I don't have the overhead because this isn't my job anymore. And I'm finding at this other end that I actually have a better quality of output and input of those who I allow in my life and what I'm giving them, because I can be more present with them.
Kurt, let me say this, and I mean this in the nicest way possible.
Mm-hmm.
If you say I want to go out to a gathering and stick fight,
yeah,
who are you going to go after?
I don't know. It depends on who's
there.
there.
The people that are dog brothers.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you would be like, I'm going to reach out to these guys who are dog brothers. I'm going to reach out to the people who fought and are still fighting or are teaching. The people who tell you, "Oh, I teach stick fighting, and I do this and I do that," I look at them and I say, like, you're bullshitting your student.
Yeah.
I am a dog brother. I'm an active dog brother. Mm-hmm. And even if I was an inactive dog brother, I can still teach you more than someone who just teaches technical sparring or, whatever. Like, I'm sorry. You will never get to that level of idea of what it's like to be one of us if you don't train with one of us.
Agreed. No, I totally agree with that, because again, you want to fight the better. You don't want to fight the average. You don't want to fight the lesser.
I want to get you into the mentality of who we are.
Yep.
So when someone says, well, I teach technical stick sparring and stick fighting, and I can tell you how good I am, and I have this level of whatever, it's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that in the nicest way possible.
No, I agree with you.
I don't give a shit what you've trained in. If you haven't been on my field with the people that I train with, then you should just shut your mouth.
Again, the mat, the field, the ring, the cage does not lie. And that's the thing that I love about fighting in general. I don't care what it is. When you're there, you cannot lie because it's you and the other person or multiple persons.
Let me rephrase that. There are people out there who know what I'm talking about. Like Mark Medeiros.
Yeah.
He knows who I am.
Yep.
He's trained with me. He knows exactly what it would take for people to get to my level, because he's trained with me for a long period of time, or enough to know what he needs to do to get to that point. So he could direct people in the right direction. Yep. But there are people out there who claim that they can.
Yep.
But they don't.
And that part of that is, actually, no, what it is integrity and professional honesty. Because in my case, for one, because the small pool of people that I have to operate with here locally is so small that I can only really be a facilitator of knowledge to a certain point, but I can't speak to the level and quality of it. Because one, I haven't fought since 2018. I live in a small town of 5,000. The level of FMA people here are up to the level that I've trained or people who've come in, which is a really small community as it is anyways. So there's only so much that I can do and facilitate, and there's only so much that I physically am capable of, because wherever stage of my life, because one, it's a numbers game and it's a time game, because if I don't have the bodies to operate with, I can't get that experience, and also if I don't have the time spent with them, I can't grow the experience. So
whereabouts are you?
I'm in Homer, Alaska, which is the ass end of the Kenai Peninsula. If you look,
I know where that is.
Yep, it's where this Discovery Channel makes all Alaskans look like idiots. It's true, but yeah, again, town of 5,000. There's not a lot of people here, and so with that, I can only do so much. For one, having worked in fight promotions, having co-owned one here, is that the level of fighters was only up to a certain level, and you had to leave to get that higher echelon, that higher quality of fighting, and that's just the reality.
Can I offer you something?
Yeah.
Like, I know it's going to be like through like Zoom and whatever else. Whatever training you want to do, where I can help and just guide or just give my 5 cents,
Yep.
it's you. I will give it to you.
Sweet. I appreciate that. Because like in my own extension of my own journey is I'm training remotely through Belton Lupus there in Seattle. And this is how I got attached to the Balintawak community.
That dude is a monster.
Yeah, he is. And touching hands with him and his crew teaches you. It humbles you. And that is the thing that I was seeking after I shut the gym down and came back to the community. Is like, I now can be a student now, and now I can improve my craft and break me out of the bubble of what I thought I knew and actually change and do better. And what I'm finding is there's a lot of people who just don't want to do that because it's hard. It's hard to get rid of that ego, and it's just hard work. Because the hardest part I find with learning new styles is making sure that I can separate what I think I knew, what I do, and actually adhere to the current curriculum of what I'm trying to learn.
Well, listen, Belton is, from what I know, I've never met him personally, but he's an amazing instructor.
He is.
Lineage is amazing. And at any point whatsoever, if you want to do some training, I'm 100% yours. So
sweet. I'll take you up on that because I got the time. So hooray. Oh man. So we've covered a lot. Is there anything in particular that you want to bring up to the community? You've done several podcasts. Do you have anything specific?
No, mate. Like, listen, like I am slowly shying away from podcasts and stuff like that, just because I honestly, it's not my thing.
Yeah,
and it makes me feel kind of weird because I don't think of myself as important as people think I may be. I just I want to see our art and what I do and what we do progress and be honest, and like move forward. Like that's all I really care. And I want to see the right people kind of move forward. Like honestly, like people like Dean Franco. Fuck man, that guy, such a nice person, and like he's just honest about everything he does.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to see. I want to see people like him like bring the next generations in. And for me, I just want to kind of like hang out in the back and just once in a while just jump in and say, hey, this is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because, that's who I am. I'm just I'm an angry Spanish person.
Oh, we all need a reality check in the background because this is how we eliminate echo chambers and personal bias. We need to have that person who's constantly poking a stick. I quote Dune all the time, but stagnation is death and leads to obliteration and obscurity. So that's an add-on to it. But the fact is you have to keep throwing rocks in the pond or rocks at the window because you're just going to get stuck with the same bullshit.
Dude, I whip stones at the windows and ponds.
Yeah.
And like I said, man, like just from what you were saying, I think it's so fucking awesome what you're doing and what you worked through to get here.
Yeah.
And whatever it's worth, my support to you is 110%.
I appreciate you, brother. I really do. And whatever I can do on the other end. And actually, here's what I
want a rubber chicken that's signed by your name, by the way.
Got you. Check. Rogers, send me an address. I got you. Here's the thing, what this podcast is from the very personal standpoint, it gives me an opportunity to talk to people that I would not have the opportunity to talk to because regionality. I live here in Alaska.
You're pissed off at, right?
Yeah, there's that too. But the other part about what this podcast allows me to do is have cool conversations with interesting people. But more importantly, I get to have the opportunity to celebrate the people that I find interesting. Because there's a lot of people that should be heard because they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the things. And honestly, with the work that people have done, that should be celebrated. So for one, this is documenting for the future because FMA is fighting it all out on the internet right now as it anyways. So what we put out is incredibly important. And if I have the opportunity to add to that positively by supporting and celebrating those who are actually doing some good with our community, I'm more than happy to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's been very cool. I know it's a long time coming, and it's been the just a conversation about nothing but for something, and I'm cool with that, man. Like you're a cool cat, man. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And I think that's a good place to end. I'm not going to do a long outro because I'm going to edit this anyway. So, everybody, go ahead and stay on. And yeah, thank you, everybody. We're just going to do this.